SLT Mobitel Home Broadband සමගින් non-stop ගමනකට data බෝවන්. SLT Mobitel Home Broadband සමගින් non-stop ගමනකට data බෝවන්.
දසනකාන්තී චූර්ණය සහිත ලීවර් ආයුෂ් දන්තාලේපය දත්වල ඇති ප්‍රශ්න 10ක් වළකයි.
Tonight, privatization begins. Government decides to sell 49% stake in Sri Lankan catering and Sri Lankan ground handling in a move to privatize Sri Lankan Airlines. Support. US Ambassador to Sri Lanka Julie Chung reaffirms support of the United States to Sri Lanka through the IMF if agreement can be reached. New committee. Power and Energy Minister Kanchana Wijesekara proposes the establishment of a committee on the procurement of fuel and coal. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9, this Monday the 29th of August 2022.
Vim Dera milliliter CA Smart Pack එක රුපියල් 85ට දැන් වෙළඳ පොලේ.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. I'm Andrew Bernard. Now, in a first step towards privatizing the state-owned national carrier Sri Lankan Airlines, the government has decided to call expressions of interest to sell 49% stake in each the Sri Lankan catering and the Sri Lankan ground handling. Speaking at a media briefing today, the chairman of Sri Lankan Airlines, Ashok Patirage, said privatizing the two entities of the national carrier will first help reduce the debt burden of Sri Lankan Airlines, making it more attractive to investors. Minister of Aviation Nimal Siripala said the government will give priority to Sri Lankan nationals and the stake would be increased to 51% or more in such a case.
At a time when the country is undergoing its worst economic crisis since independence, privatization of loss-making state-owned institutions to reduce their debt burden has been widely discussed by authorities during the past few months. President Ranil Wickremesinghe, while insisting on the need to revive state-owned enterprises through a restructuring process, highlighted the need for reforms in the loss-making national carrier Sri Lankan Airlines. Minister of Ports, Shipping and Aviation Nimal Siripala de Silva revealed that total debt of the airline stands at $1.126 billion, equivalent to 401 billion rupees. With a massive debt burden, government is looking at privatizing the airline. As a first step, proposals are invited from interested investors for a stake of 49% in Sri Lankan catering and 49% in Sri Lankan Airlines ground handling.
This is what I have proposed and put it before the cabinet. This will come before the cabinet within 1 or 2 weeks. Then the cabinet will have to give its nod, and I am sure that once the cabinet approves this, then we will start calling for expression of interest. In the restructuring program, first the Sri Lankan catering will come. Thereafter, the Sri Lankan ground handling will come. Thereafter, the Sri Lankan airline will come.
Catering is a separate company, so it's very easy for us to go ahead with that. Ground handling, which is a subdivision within the airline. So what we are doing is we will parallelly start carving that out and create a separate entity, and then we will go for that process. So the whole idea is, now if you take Air India, government has taken substantial losses, written off a lot of debt. So I don't think our government has the capacity of writing off $800 million. So that is the reason that we are going on this phased out step-by-step approach. And we feel that we can reduce a substantial amount of debt before privatizing the airline, bringing for a partner. So we think that once you reduce, there will be good value for the airline. There will be good prospective investors. So that's the plan.
Meanwhile, government is looking at offering 49% stake in Sri Lankan Airlines to a prospective investor with priority given to Sri Lankan nationals.
I have been advised by the Civil Aviation Authority on the legal position that Sri Lankan should hold 51% of the shares in the Sri Lankan Airlines to retain the landing rights. Unless we negotiate it separate with each and every country, that may take time. We are giving the full management rights to them.
So the point is, without the landing rights, this may not be very, in the eyes of the investors, it may not be great value for them. Now, if you take Air India, for example, Air India was bought over by an Indian company, Tata. So Air India also, right, most of the value what they paid for those landing rights, right? But because since Tata came forward, that problem didn't arise. So even in Sri Lanka, that's what the Honorable Minister said.
No, in Sri Lanka,
Sri Lankan combination. Who can have 51%?
51%.
Then there is no problem.
Or 70%.
Then the government can sell. So it will retain within the country. Then these bilaterals will be.
So really, we are giving priority to any Sri Lankan entrepreneur who will come with the airline.
The Minister of Power and Energy, Kanchana Vijayasekara, accused the opposition of not taking proactive measures during their time in government to increase the country's ability to generate more power to meet the growing demands. The minister made these remarks in Parliament today when the recent electricity tariff revision was taken up for debate. Now, Minister Kanchana Vijayasekara added that the burden on the public today could have been avoided if the opposition had taken policy decisions to revise tariff every 3 years, like it had been done at 3 instances between the period from 2012 to 2014.
On the 9th of August, the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka granted approval to the Ceylon Electricity Board to increase tariffs by an average 75% across all categories. The CEB has been allowed to increase the electricity bill by 264% for consumers whose usage runs up to 30 units a month and 211% for consumption of units between 31 and 60. An electricity tariff revision was brought about to convert the currently loss-making CEB into a profiting entity by way of generating 500 million rupees. The move nevertheless was not received well among members of the public who were accused of unfair tariffs. During today's parliamentary session too, the upward revision of electricity tariffs debated at length.
මේ විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලය ප්‍රතිව්‍යුහගත කරන කියන අදහසට සමගි ජන බලවේගයේ හැටියට ඒ අදහස අපි පිළිගන්නවා. නමුත් තමුන්නාන්සලා එදා විපක්ෂයේ ඉන්නකොට ඒ ප්‍රතිව්‍යුහගත කරනවට විරුද්ධව විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලය විකුණනවායි කියලා මේ රටේ විශාල ජනමතයක් එදා තමුන්නාන්සලා හැදුවා.
දැන් ඔබ ගත්ත තීරණයෙන් මේ කණ්ඩායම් දෙකම බං කළොත් අද වෙනකොට මේ කුඩාම පොඩිම කණ්ඩායම් වලට තමයි වැඩිම ගාස්තු වැඩි කිරීමක් සිදු වෙලා තියෙන්නේ.
However, Subject Minister Kanchana Vijayasekara today defended the move, stating that the burden on the public could have been alleviated if the opposition took corrective measures when in power to revise tariffs.
මේ රටේ විදුලි බිල අවස්ථා 4කදී විශේෂයෙන්ම මහජන උපයෝගිතා කොමිසම මැදිහත් වීමෙන් 2012 වැඩි කරා 2013 වැඩි කරා විදුලි බිල 2014 ඔරොච්චෝලි බලාගාරය මේ රටට දායාද කරාට පස්සේ 25%කින් විදුලි බිල අඩු කරලා ඒ සහනයත් ජනතාවට ලබා දෙන්න පුළුවන් වුණා. ඒ දා තිබුණු උත්පාදන වියදමත් එක්ක ඒ 2014 ඒ තීන්දුව ගත්තට පස්සේ ඔබතුමාලට තිබුණු පළවෙනි අවුරුද්දේ විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලය 2015 අවුරුද්දේ රුපියල් බිලියන 19.3ක ආදායමක් ලාභයක් වාර්තා කරනවා. 2016 රුපියල් බිලියන 5.8ක ලාභයක් වාර්තා කරනවා. හැබැයි කොහෙද කඩාවැටීම එන්නේ? ඊට පස්සේ ඔබතුමාලා සැලසුම් කරන්නේ මේ රටේ අවශ්‍යතාවය අනුව විදුලි උත්පාදනය කිරීම සඳහා අවශ්‍යතාවය ගන්නෙ නැහැ. 2017 අවුරුද්දේ පාඩුව රුපියල් බිලියන 40යි. 2018 රුපියල් බිලියන 70යි. 2019 රුපියල් බිලියන 168යි. මේ ආකාරයෙන් තමයි ලංකා විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලයේ එදා දවසේ අවශ්‍ය ප්‍රතිපත්ති තීන්දුව ක්‍රියාත්මක නොකිරීම නිසා අද විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලය මේ තත්ත්වයටපත් කරලා තියෙන්නේ. 2014 ඉඳලා 2022 අඩුම තරමේ අවුරුදු 3කට වතාවක් හෝ අවුරුදු 4කට වතාවක් හෝ ඔබතුමාලා තීන්දුවක් ගත්තනම් විදුලි බිල සංශෝධනය කරන්න මෙතරම් බරක් ජනතාව මත වැටෙන්නේ නැහැ කියන එකත් මේ වෙලාවේ මතක් කරනවා. ගෘහස්ත පාරිභෝගිකයන් කියලා කියන්නේ සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ඒකක 30ක් දක්වා ලක්ෂ 14ක්. උපරිම ඒකක සංඛ්‍යාව 30යි නම් පාවිච්චි කරේ උපරිම ඒකකයකට ගෙවු ප්‍රමාණය තමයි රුපියල් 105. ඒ 105 මුදල තමයි අද මේ වැඩිවීමත් සමග රුපියල් 360ක් දක්වා වර්ධනය වෙන්නේ. ප්‍රතිශතයක් හැටියට ගත්තම වැඩි. අපේ රටේ ඔබතුමන්ලම කිව්ව උද්දමනය වැඩි වෙලා තියෙනවා. විවිධ භාණ්ඩවල මිල වැඩි වෙලා තියෙනවා. රුපියල් 360 කියන එක මාසයකට විදුලි බිලක් හැටියට ගෙවන්න නොහැකි කවුරුත් ඉන්නවද? ගෙවන්න නොහැකියාවක් තියෙන විදියක් නැහැ. අද පාන් ගෙඩියකට රුපියල් 200ක් ගෙවනවා. රුපියල් 360ක් මාසයකට. මේ සඳහා උත්පාදන වියදම් විතරක්. රුපියල් 40ක් හැටියට සාමාන්‍ය තිබුවම සාමාන්‍යයෙන් රුපියල් 1500ක් පමණ වැය වෙන එකක් තමයි රුපියල් 360කට පමණ ලබා දීලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒක තමයි ලබා දීලා තියෙන සහනය. මේ ක්ෂේත්‍ර සඳහා ඒ සහනය ඒ ආකාරයෙන්ම ලබා දීලා තියෙනවා. පහුගිය කාලවල ලබා දීලා තිබුණු සහනය දීලා තියෙනවා. එතකොට ඒකක 30යි 31යි 60යි අතරේ 31යි 60 අතර ඒක තමයි ඊළඟ වැඩිම පිරිස ඉන්නේ. ලක්ෂ 11ක් ඉන්නවා. ඒ පිරිස ඒකක 60කට ගෙව්වේ රුපියල් 280යි මාසෙකට. රුපියල් 280යි උපරිම ගාන. ඒ ගාන තමයි රුපියල් 780 බවට පත් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ.
Now, the Power and Energy Minister Kanchana Vijayasekara also proposed the establishment of a committee on the procurement of fuel and coal as opposition members and former ministers claim that fuel can be supplied at lower prices and brought at a lower cost to the government. Although queues were seen outside refilling stations in the past few days, the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation reassures that adequate stocks are available for distribution in the coming days.
Fuel queues are seen again in Colombo and suburbs due to a shortage in supply to refueling stations in the past few days, and some filling stations were even closed. However, fuel bowsers were dispatched from the Muthurajawala terminal today as well. More commuters were seen using public transportation to reach Colombo this morning. School transport service providers were also engaged in transportation despite their earlier warning to refrain from operating due to shortage in fuel. The National Fuel Pass system based on QR code, which was adopted at the beginning of this month, has been successfully implemented across fuel stations island-wide for 4 weeks now. According to the Power and Energy Ministry, 6.1 million vehicles have been registered so far for the QR code system. Fuel distribution amounted to over 36 million litres between the 1st of August and 7th of August, over 36 million litres between 8th of August and 14th, 33.79 million litres between 15th and 21st, and 36.58 million litres for the week ending yesterday. Meanwhile, responding to recent claims made by opposition, Power and Energy Minister Kanchana Wijesekara said he proposes the appointment of a parliamentary committee on the procurement of fuel and coal that is chaired by a member of the opposition.
විදුලි බල හා බලශක්ති අමාත්‍යවරයා හැටියට මම ඉල්ලීමක් කරනවා විශේෂයෙන්ම ඉන්ධන සහ ගල් අඟුරු ප්‍රසම්පාදනය පිළිබඳවත් කාර්ය සභාව. ඒ කාර්ය සභාව විපක්ෂයේ മന്ത്രിවරයෙක්ට බාර ගන්නව නම් සුදුසුයි කියලා යෝජනා කරනවා. විශේෂයෙන්ම චම්පික රණවක ඇමතුමා ඒ වගේම හිටපු മന്ത്രിවරු කීප දෙනෙක් මේ ඉන්ධන ඉතාමත්ම අඩු මුදල් වලට ආනයනය කළ හැකි බව සහ අලෙවි කළ හැකි බව කියලා තියෙනවා. ඒ නිසා විශේෂ බාර ඇමතිවරයා හැටියට එවැනි කාර්ය සභාවක් හදලා විපක්ෂයට ලබා දෙනවා නම් ඒ සඳහා සම්පූර්ණ ඒ අවශ්‍ය සහයෝගය ලබා දෙනවා. ඒක බාර ගන්නත් කියලා ඉල්ලීමක් කරනවා.
Responding to the Energy Minister's statement, main opposition MP Dr. Harsha De Silva said that any committee could be appointed if the 19th Amendment is enacted.
තවසේම 19 වෙනි ව්‍යවස්ථාව ගෙනාව නම් ප්‍රසම්පාදන ස්වාධීන කොමිෂන් සභාව තියෙනවා මේ ඔක්කොම කරගන්න පුළුවන් ඒක ඒ නිසා 19 ගෙනාවට වඩා හොඳයි.
Now, the Parliament announced names of members nominated by the Committee of Selection to serve in the Committee on Parliamentary Business Committee and on Ethics and Privileges and the Committee on Standing Orders. The Committee of Selection has nominated Dr. Susil Premajayantha, S.B. Disanayaka, Pavitra Devi Vanyarachi, Dr. Suren Raghavan, Mayantha Disanayaka, Charles Nirmalanathan, K. Sujit Sanjay Pereira, Sagar Karyavasam, and Yadamini Gunawardana to serve in the Committee on Standing Orders. Meanwhile, Dr. Vijay Dasa Rajapaksa, Dilan Pereira, Dallas Alaperuma, Vasudeva Nanakara, Kabir Hashim, Ranjit Madhu Bandara, Talata Atukorala, Kanaka Herat, Vijita Berugoda, Taraka Balasurya, Anuruddha Jayaratna, Gigi Ponnambalam, Hesha Vitanage, Kokila Gunawardana have been nominated to serve in the Committee on Ethics and Privileges. Meanwhile, 4 more members were nominated by the Committee on Selection to serve in the Committee on Parliamentary Business. Accordingly, MPs Mahinda Amaravira, Vajra Abhivardhanam, Talatatu Korala and Iran Vikramaratne have been nominated to serve in the committee. Stay with us for more news after this short break.
කාලගුණය කොහොමුණත් රයිනෝ නං වාලට සේෆ් තමයි මුළු ගෙදරම. Rhino Cement Roofing Sheets. Then you know Rhino. I know.
Big 3.
Welcome back. Now, the US Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Julie Chung, says the United States will support Sri Lanka through the International Monetary Fund if an agreement can be reached. Speaking with the US-Sri Lankan Business Council on ways the US and Sri Lankan businesses can collaborate to ensure Sri Lanka gets back on path of prosperity, the American envoy said the US will redouble efforts to support Sri Lanka along this path. She said support will be extended through ongoing efforts like financing for small and medium-scale businesses, fertilizer and seeds for farmers, education exchange, and training to strengthen public financial management. Chung also said the US-Sri Lanka bilateral trade already supports more than 180,000 workers, supplying exports rather to the US and contributes billions to the Sri Lankan economy. Now, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who is also the country's Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense, has received a message written from President Ranil Wickremesinghe concerning the bilateral relations that connect the two countries. The message has been received by the Saudi Deputy Foreign Minister Walid bin Abdul Karim Al Khariji during a meeting with Sri Lanka's Minister of Environment of Sri Lanka, Nazir Ahmad. During the meeting, the bilateral relations between the two countries and ways of enhancing them in various fields were discussed. Now, the police apprehended 3 people suspected to be involved in causing damages to the houses of MPs Vimal Weerawansa, Lasantha Alagiyawanna and Anuruddhika Fernando on the 9th of May.
The police arrested 3 suspects in connection with the incidents of attacking the residences of 3 MPs and damaging their property. The suspects were arrested for the damages caused to the houses of MPs Vimal Weerawansa, Lasantha Alagiyawanna and Arundhika Fernando. A 37-year-old resident of the Hokandara area was arrested in connection with the attack of MP Vimal Weerawansa's house by the Malabe police yesterday. The suspect arrested in connection with damage in the house of MP Lasantha Alagiyawanna is a resident of the Kirindiwala area, aged 43. He was arrested by the Western Province North Division officials yesterday. Meanwhile, a 45-year-old resident of Dankotua has been arrested by Dankotua police with regard to the damages caused to the house of MP Arundhika Fernando.
Now, the Sri Lankan Navy arrested 44 individuals who were suspected of illegally migrating via the sea routes. The apprehensions were made during a special search operation conducted by the Navy off Trincomalee and Valatai in Batticaloa last night. In a special operation carried out by the Eastern Naval Command, a suspicious local multi-day fishing trawler was intercepted off Trincomalee, where 29 individuals attempting to illegally and dangerously travel by boat. Among the apprehended were 25 men, including 5 connected to the racket, 2 women and 2 below the age of 18 years. Another search operation carried out in Kuchavalane Beach led to the arrest of 2 suspects who were suspected to have transferred people from the shores to the fishing trawler intercepted earlier. Meanwhile, during search into a similar local multi-day fishing trawler, 5 men were arrested and taken into custody of the Sri Lankan Navy. 10 others were arrested in the beach area. The suspects will be handed over to the Trincomalee Harbour Police and the Kuchavalene Police legal proceedings. Welcome back. Now, Sri Lanka's stock slipped for the 5th consecutive session today to its lowest close in nearly 3 weeks, with the day's turnover slumping to a 1-month low as most investors stayed on the sidelines ahead of tomorrow's interim budget debate. The all-share price index fell 0.69% or 60.92 points to 8,732.47, its lowest since the 10th of August. The market generated 1.2 billion rupees in turnover, the lowest since the 1st of August, less than a half of this year's average daily turnover of 3.11 billion rupees. The more liquid S&P SL20 index ended 1.15% points down at 2,830.67. Net foreign outflow was 59 million rupees, while foreign outflow so far this year is 385 million rupees. Now, US stock index futures fell on worries over the Federal Reserve's plan to keep raising interest rates in its fight against inflation, even at the cost of an economic downturn. Federal Reserve's Chair Jerome Powell said on Friday that the US economy would need tight monetary policy for some time before inflation is under control, knocking Wall Street's main indexes down more than 3%. Federal Reserve's Chairman Jerome Powell's blunt and hawkish remarks quashed hopes of the US Central Bank will resort to modest rate hikes after recent data suggested that inflation was peaking. Money market traders are pricing in a 68.5% chance of a third straight 75 basis point interest rate hike in September and expect the Fed funds rate to end the year above 3.7%. The benchmark S&P 500 index has climbed 11.6% since mid-June, but is still in a bear market after plummeting earlier this year. Some investors fear a tough September due to seasonal weaknesses and the economic pain from interest rate hikes. The US 2-year Treasury yield, which is particularly sensitive to interest rate expectations, scaled a 15-year high, while the closely watched yield curve, measured by the gap between 2 and 10-year yields, remains strongly inverted. An inversion is seen by many as a reliable signal of an impending recession. Now, oil rose more than 1% today as potential OPEC Plus output cuts and conflict in Libya helped offset strong US dollar and a dire outlook for the US growth. Saudi Arabia, de facto leader of the OPEC, last week raised the possibility of production cuts, which sources say could coincide with a boost in supply from Iran should it clinch a nuclear deal with the West. Brent crude rose 0.6% to $101.64 a barrel, extending last week's 4.4% gain. US West Texas Intermediate crude was up 1.3% at $94.28 after rising by 2.5% last week. OPEC Plus, comprising OPEC, Russia and allied producers, meets to set policy on the 5th of September. The price of crude oil has surged this year, with Brent coming close to a record high of $147 in March as Russia's invasion of Ukraine exacerbated supply concerns. Rising fears over high interest rates, inflation and recession risks have since weighed on the market. Now, Iraq's powerful Shiite Muslim cleric Muqtada al-Sadr has said he was quitting politics and closing his institutions in response to an irretractable political deadlock. The current impasse between Sadr and Shiite rivals has given Iraq its longest run without a government. The decision to quit could fuel instability in the country. Criticizing fellow Shiite political leaders for failing to heed his calls for reform, Iraq's powerful Shiite Muslim cleric Muqtada al-Sadr announced his withdrawal from politics. Sadr has previously announced withdrawals from politics or government and the disbanding of militias loyal to him, but retains widespread control over state institutions and still has a paramilitary group with thousands of members. He has often returned to political activity after similar announcements, although the current political deadlock in Iraq appears harder to resolve than previous periods of dysfunction. Sadr's party, the Sadrist bloc, came first in an October election, but he withdrew his lawmakers from parliament in June after he failed to form a government of his choosing, one where he threatened to exclude powerful Shiite rivals close to Iran. Supporters of the mercurial cleric then stormed Baghdad's central government zone. Since then, they have occupied parliament, halting the process to choose the new president and prime minister. Sadr now insists on early elections and the dissolution of parliament. He says no politician who has been in power since the US invasion in 2003 can hold office. And that's all we have for you this evening. Join us again tomorrow at the same time. Good night.